Guys, we appreciate you being here for session 8 of our virtual Forage College. We have a few more that are checking in as we kind of go through some introductions and we'll just make a few announcements. But I'd like to thank our speaker for this evening, Mr. Earl Ward. Earl is the Area Livestock Specialist that covers the northeastern part of the state. It covers what, 18, 20 counties up in that area?
About 21 to 24 counties.
Okay, it just depends on the week.
Well, it depends on what my boss tells me I'm covering.
There you go.
My area is 21, but the district is 24. So,
But we appreciate Earl. He's going to go through some ways that we can use to supplement the forage that we have and make the best use of the forage that we have and still meet the requirements that our animals have for whatever, you know, stage of lactation or stage of production that they're in. And so we appreciate Earl being with us this evening. Just as some announcements, as of right now, we do not have a meeting planned for October. I think the thought was to use October to possibly tour the Pushmataha County burn unit, the research burn unit down there. And I think they are having a field day. I'll have to be sure, but I think it is October the 8th. That's a Friday.
yeah, it's the 8th.
It is the 8th. So if anyone is interested in attending that, get with me or one of the county educators and we can get you some information on that. And if anyone from the McLean County area wants to go, we can probably arrange an opportunity to ride down there together. And if you'd like to ride down there and go see that unit, that thing has been in existence for the past 50 or 60 years, where they do annual burns in some plots, biennial burns, and then burns every 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, and show the effects of fire frequency on native species and grass management from that. So very interesting plot and research unit. If you've never had an opportunity to see it, it is there's a lot of good information comes from there. So if you have an opportunity, make sure you attend that October the 8th. But we won't have a formal Zoom meeting in October. We'll meet back again in November. So with that, I think that's all the real big announcements that we have. We'll turn the floor over to Earl and let him get started with his program. Earl, thanks for being with us, and we'll turn it over to you now.
All right. So
all right.
What else you got?
Well, that's how my brain works. You think of things. If you guys do have questions, we tend to find we're in a small enough group now that you probably can answer them. If you don't want to ask your question, feel free to use the chat box. We'll keep that open over here on the side, and I'll kind of keep an eye on that. If you type questions in, I can kind of relay them to Earl as the opportunity arises. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them or type them into that, and we'll be watching it for you. So
Yeah. Or if while we're going along, if you have a question about something I'm specifically saying right now, it doesn't bother me if you unmute, ask the question, and we'll address it right then. So, or type it in the chat. It doesn't matter to me. But if you do have questions, we'd love to be able to answer them for you. So, like Justin said, I'm the Northeast Area Livestock Specialist. My forte is feeds and feeding. I'm a ruminant nutritionist. So for the forage stuff, you know, I don't know any of the technical stuff. I'm not an agronomist. Justin knows way more about forage, producing forage and stuff like that than I do. But you know, what Justin kind of asked me to cover tonight was trying to match those forages with our cows' nutritional requirements, and trying to figure out, you know, how do we utilize the things that we have available to us the most efficiently. So I will try to share.
Earl, I've made you a co-host. You should be able to share now. There you go. Good deal.
Are you seeing the right one, Justin?
Yeah, we're seeing one on your notes page. So, but we're seeing them. Yeah, there it all is in one. That's one screen now. Yeah,
All right.
that's right.
All right. So as I was going through this presentation, I thought, like, what would be the goal of the presentation, and something to look at. And to me, it was like, we need to produce forage to match our herd's nutrient requirements, but then we also need to be supplementing our herd to maximize the qualities of our forage. So, you know, if most producers are supplementing what they've always supplemented with no regard to quantity or quality of forage availability. It's that whole, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. Granted, it gets us by, but a lot of times if we walk through the calculations, there's a really good chance we're leaving money on the table that, you know, as all of our other input costs go up, we definitely need to be looking at ways to try to get savings on the backside so that we can increase our overall profit. All right, so I wouldn't be a nutritionist if I didn't bring up these nutrient requirements for beef cattle. Of course, we're sitting there looking at water, carbohydrates, which our carbohydrates are used for our energy and our fiber, proteins, which are amino acids, and they also actually provide some energy. Our fats, our lipids there, really, really dense energy, and of course our minerals and our vitamins. So real quick, those who are paying attention, type in what is the most important nutrient, or speak up real quick. Anybody? Bueller. What is it, Justin?
Water.
Water. By far, water is the most important nutrient that we can supply. If you look at any feed tag, it should say provide ample amounts of, you know, clean water. If we're not using, if they're not getting enough clean water, they can't utilize the rest of these nutrients and get them transferred through the body. All right, so when we talk about normally beef nutrition, there's a couple of things we're really worried about. One is crude protein, and what that is simply a measurement of the percent nitrogen in a feed multiplied times 6.25. So if you look at crude protein of feed, all we're doing in a lab is testing for nitrogen and then putting it into that equation. For beef cows, our energy that we use is total digestible nutrients, TDN. Now, what it is it's a long calculation where it takes into account, you know, the digestibility of carbohydrates and the digestibility of proteins and all that up. What happens is when you send in a forage sample to our lab, they actually have another test they do, testing for acid detergent fiber. And through research, we have a really good equation to do a conversion to TDN. So again, we're using TDN as our energy value, and we're using protein or crude protein as our protein values. One big thing I want to point out, and I always point this out, we always talk in percentages, and you'll kind of hear me talk tonight about a dry cow requires 8% crude protein. You know, a lactating cow requires 10%. But in reality, they don't require percentages. They require pounds of nutrients. So they require, you know, so many pounds of crude protein. Kind of like we require calories. That is an absolute amount. We can measure that. They require pounds of actual crude protein, pounds of TDN. So be mindful of that. If you ever look it up in a nutrient requirement tables, hopefully they're expressed as pounds per head per day. All right, so something I really want to bring up is if we're already have cows that are in low body condition score or something like that, we need to understand the priority that animal has for its nutrients. Okay, so as we go along, as we're feeding and we feed past maintenance, it's like that thing's going to waterfall on down. Okay, so if we've met our maintenance and there's anything extra, it's going to go to fetal development. Anything extra is going to go to lactation. Anything past that's going to go to growth, reproduction, before we ever start putting condition on cows. All right, so if we can eliminate some of these, for instance, if we have a cow that's in gestation mode and she's not lactating yet, that's a good time to increase body condition score because we're taking out the lactation part of it. So be thinking of that. Like when I'm feeding an animal, it's got to go through all these steps before I can get to increasing my reproduction or increasing my body condition scores. So if we look at crude protein, I'm going to go into some nutritional stuff here. When we feed crude protein to a ruminant animal, we have that protein that is breaking down inside the rumen and that protein that is either broken down in the hindgut or not broken down at all. All right, so we call DIP, which is degradable intake protein. That is protein that is digested in the rumen. And in this little chart or graph here, anything that's above the line, the circles, that is degradable inside the rumen. Anything past that, that's below that, down in the gray, undegradable intake protein. So it skips the rumen. Some of it is digested in the hindgut, but then some of it is also passed out. I show this because this also shows how long that protein is broken down. So you see the very first one there on the left is urea. That is a non-protein nitrogen. And as soon as it hits the rumen environment, whoom, it's degraded. That's why we see such a problem with that. If we move out to like soybean meal, it's a little bit safer protein. And you see all the way there on the distiller's grains, a lot longer for that to break down inside the rumen and a lot more bypass protein. Now, that's a big reason why people, stockers love that distiller's grains, is because that bypass protein goes back and feeds part of the animal. So not all bypass protein, is kicked out the back end. A lot of it is used for growth of the animal. So to kind of illustrate that, I have this little animation I put together. So if you look inside of a rumen, which is a perfectly square box like that inside the cow, you got to realize this is about 40 gallons of capacity here. There's basically 3 layers inside of it. The very top of it will be a gas layer. In the middle, there'll be this mat, which is, your long stem forages, your roughage, things like that. And that's where most of your microbes are going to live, is in that floating mat. And of course, below that is just liquid. It'll have dead microbes in it, small particulates, things like that. All right. So again, crude protein is the amount of nitrogen times 6.25. As we pour feed down into that rumen, we know that part of that protein is going to be broken down and part of it's not. So let's just assume for this feed here, about 40% of it is going to escape the rumen. It's going to be bypass protein. All right, so that means the remaining 60% is going to be converted to ammonia, and that ammonia is what's feeding the microbes. So this is extremely important because when you're feeding a ruminant animal, you're basically feeding 2 animals. You're feeding the rumen bugs, and then you're feeding the animal. The beauty of that is this ruminant animal can break down things that we can't, right? Cellulose, things like that, because of those microbes. All right. So what happens then is if there's too much ammonia, it goes out of the rumen, through the rumen wall into the blood system to the liver. The liver will then either kick it out through the urine, and that's why you smell ammonia if you're feeding high protein stuff, or it actually gets recycled back through the saliva and starts the system over again. Okay. Now, the other thing that's happening at the same time is you have those microbes that are constantly growing and dying. Well, as they die, they move through the system. That is good for the animal because that microbe is then broken down into amino acids and is used for protein for the animal. So we call that microbial protein. A lot of that is absorbed through the blood, and what's left doesn't get broke down, gets kicked out into the feces. So that's the kind of the down and dirty of what happens to crude protein. We talked about urea, which you'll see on a feed tag, it'll say NPN or non-protein nitrogen. And what that is basically it is not animal or crop-based protein. So urea, if we look at what percentage of nitrogen it is 46% nitrogen. And again, we get the crude protein by multiplying that times 6.25. So urea is 287% crude protein. All right. So this is where, if we're really short of protein, this is a great, really cheap way to do it, no matter what fertilizer prices are. So here's what happens. These are actually little urea prills. They're going to go inside the rumen. There is no bypass protein. If you've ever had urea and put a water hose to it, you see that it immediately just dissolves and goes to nothing. So 100% of that, once it hits the environment, and you've seen how fast that happens, it happens within 2 hours. 100% of it is broken down to ammonia, and we go through the host system just like we did with the natural protein. Okay, we just don't have any bypass protein at that time. So very, very efficient here. The problem is that if we overdo it, we can get a toxicity. So here's what happens when we have a toxicity. Non-protein nitrogen going in, you see a bunch of it. Everything else is going to happen the same way it did. Okay. The problem is we don't have just a little ammonia leaving the rumen. We now have a way, a lot more overflow of ammonia coming out. What happens then is that the liver is overloaded. It doesn't know what to do. So it changes that ammonia back to urea. That urea goes into the blood. That's when we get toxicity. Okay. So be careful with that. For instance, if you're fertilizing your pasture, do not leave a pile of urea out there because they will eat it quickly, and it does not take very long to kill them. So the other thing you have to be careful with that is a lot of our liquid feeds and a lot of our tubs will have non-protein nitrogen in it. And if you have cattle just sit there and tank up on it, you could actually cause some troubles. So kind of rule of thumb for it, we never want more than 1/3 of the crude protein to come from non-protein nitrogen. We definitely need to have an adaptation period to be slow to get there. And a transition period from non-protein nitrogen, if we go back to natural proteins, very quick. But then the times where we would really use this product to match our forages are the times when we have really low crude protein, content in our forages. So low that the rumen bugs cannot function right because they don't have enough food for them. So we can use this non-protein nitrogen because it is all broken down inside the rumen. And so therefore it's feeding the bugs, and that keeps the bugs up and running and keeps the whole system going. So if we look at energy, again, I talked about it's expressed as total digestible nutrients. If you look at your forage analysis and things like that, you'll also see the net energy system, which is net energy for maintenance is NEM, net energy for gain, and net energy for lactation. This is a lot more accurate way of calculating, estimating gains and predicting animal performance, things like that. That's what they'll use a lot of times for feedlots, growing yards, and such. For cow-calf operations, a lot of times the total digestible nutrients is what gets us, close enough. So you also have to be careful that if you are following the net energy system, like for instance, our forage test is basically just an equation based off the TDN value. So again, that's not necessarily as important. If we look at the way the animal uses the energy, we start out with gross energy. And of course, anything that goes out the back end, that fecal energy loss, it's gone. So that gets us digestible energy. Well, then we have gaseous energy loss, which gets us metabolizable energy. Here's the big point where we lose a lot during the winter is this: from metabolizable to net energy is that heat increment. Cold stress during the winter increases our energy requirements through the roof, depending on how cold it is. If we think back to our cold snap we had last February, there wasn't a cow out in Oklahoma that was putting on weight. I mean, energy requirements were through the roof because it was so cold. So that's something we really need to think about during that inclement weather. And again, once we get to net energy, that's going to go to maintenance, and anything else then will be rolled over to production and go down through that nutrient priorities that we talked about earlier. All right, so that kind of gets us through the nutrition stuff I wanted to talk about as far as what we're kind of using here. We have to realize that when we are in the cow-calf industry, we are basically grass farmers. We should be promoting our grass to do as much as they can to produce beef. All right. Of course, I have there all the different production sectors. Research has shown that 70% of the amount of energy it takes to produce a pound of beef that's in the grocery store, that 70% of that energy comes from cow-calf operators. Now you think, well, that doesn't make sense because they spend so much time in the feedlots and stuff. But you got to realize I fed that cow for an entire year until she had another calf. And then I also had to feed her and that calf to get it up to weaning. So that 70% of energy comes from that time. It's very important for us to start managing our nutrition because of that next statement. Feed costs account for 40 to 50% of your total annual cow cost. So if that is our largest cost, that also tells me that's our largest opportunity for savings. So if, I can't go to the sale barn and sell calves and, require that they sell higher than they should. If we could do that, I mean, that'd be great, but we can only get what two people are willing to bid them up to, right? So the one thing I can control as a producer is I can control what I do on my place, and controlling that feed cost is my greatest opportunities to control my total annual cost. So the other thing I want to point out here is there is a direct correlation between the number of days that you're feeding hay and your feed cost. All right. Hopefully through this Forage College, I haven't seen the schedule, but you've had somebody come in and talk about stockpiling warm season grasses and stockpiling cool season grasses. And the reason we're doing that is to get rid of at least 30 days of hay, because reducing the number of days you hay is extremely important to your total cost. All right. So again, I'm a ruminant nutritionist and I've worked for a lot of feed companies, but I've also was trained in grad school that we should take care of our land and do all that we can with it before we start going to the feed store, right? So let's promote what we have on our property. Let's take care of it. And then we're going to supplement, not feed, we're going to supplement what that forage can't provide. So what can it do? Well, most of us in Oklahoma are warm season forage based operations. So here is a graph basically showing a spring cows calving, spring calving cows, crude protein and energy requirements versus what is supplied by Bermuda grass. All right, so let me kind of show you what we're talking about here. The bars, the green bar, and then the lower like burnt orange bar is the animal's requirements, okay? The lines are crude protein and energy supplied by Bermuda grass. Now, the way that that's calculated is I took what her dry matter intake would be during that phase of production times the quality of the forage at that time. So if you see these numbers, you're like, well, that doesn't match anything I've seen in books. Well, it's probably calculated a little different. So we see that our nutrient requirements for energy is pretty much always above the energy supplied, which is our red line right there. All right. Crude protein, there's a couple of months we really are short, but for the most part, we're high enough for the spring calving cow. All right. So we see there's times where we need energy, where there's times we need protein, but there's a lot of times that we're needing a little bit of both. If we look at a fall calver, it's basically kind of the same thing. Now, which system would be better? I've done calculations on this before, and it pretty much comes out about the same as far as how much money you're going to spend on one way or the other. You know, most of our people are spring calvers, in that way that they can get them through winter. And then once they calve, they got green grass, and that green grass takes off and they don't have to worry about them too much. But if you really do just punch the numbers, it's kind of whatever fits your system. So whether you're a fall calver or whether you're a spring calver, you're going to spend money somewhere. And so you'll need that. Here's what I don't want. It's amazing to me, and Justin and I will probably retire off of this, is trying to get someone to have a defined calving season. All right. If you don't have a defined calving season, here's your requirements all the way across the top, right? Let's see if I can get this. What is that? So your requirements for TDN are always high, and your requirements for crude protein are always high, because you have to feed to the animal with the highest, requirements. Well, if you have a year-round calving season, there's always one lactating. So your best bet that we can tell you at this point is have a defined calving season. Narrow it down. If you are year-round, start narrowing it down to, so many months, 4 months. Do that. And then back it down the further and the tighter you can get it. Research has shown so many times that will just, when you're selling calves, that will totally increase the amount of money you get, because your calves all look the same now. You can sell bigger lots of cattle that are the same size. The other thing that does is let you manage your nutrition to fit that animal during that nutritional phase. And so therefore, even if we had 2 calving seasons, a spring and a fall, keeping those 2 separated and feeding the ones we need to feed right now and not feeding the ones we don't need to feed helps save pennies per day, which add up over the year. So always make sure you have a calving season. If we look at an animal's nutrient requirements, okay, I want to first point out here that these nutrient requirements can be found either if you have an OSU beef manual, or just Google OSU nutrient requirements for beef cattle fact sheet, which is E974, and you can print it out. That way you can kind of start looking at what are your animal's nutrient requirements. What I have here is between 900 to 1,500 pound cows. Their crude protein is in the line there, and their total digestible nutrients is in the bar. The crude protein is on the left side of the graph. TDN is on the right side. So as we see, as we move up in weight, of course, there's going to be an increase in crude protein and energy, even in a mature animal, because the more weight we have on it, the more protein is having to turn over in the animal, and then just more energy it takes to move that animal around. So that all makes pretty much sense. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is you'll see at the top, it says lactating with a 20-pound peak milk production. All right, so we'll talk about this a little bit later when we're looking at the forage supplementation program, but I promise you, I would be surprised if most of you know how many pounds of milk your beef cows are producing. So what I always do is, if we don't know, I always pick the middle one, and 20 pounds is where I always settle in on. So that is 20 pounds peak milk. Now, Dr. Lawman years ago done research on their herd in Stillwater and realized that their average peak milk production was on Angus cows was 32 pounds. Well, we don't even have requirements for cows who make 32 pounds. So all those years of selecting cows with more milk, thinking it transferred to more weaning weight, all we did was select animals with higher nutrient requirements. And probably our environment limited the growth of those calves after that. So what I want to show here, this is kind of the same graph. This is looking at only crude protein, and we're looking at that Bermuda grass in the blue line there. So we see, again, there's November, December, January, February, where we know Bermuda grass is pretty much down to nothing in crude protein. And so therefore, what is an option that we could do? Well, it is simply, if we do have fescue, trying to put the fescue in and manage fescue to get through those 4 months. Having that cool season forage in there, and I'm using fescue, you can put in ryegrass, you can put in whatever. You know, that would give you an opportunity to make up the deficits that your warm season grasses aren't doing. Hopefully you've seen this in some other presentations and things like that. I'm not saying go in and tear up ground and put in cool seasons, because most of the producers that I've met with, there's a section of their land that might naturally have fescue in it. I've even got a corner of my place that just over time, fescue has really taken over, this, 4 or 5 acres. Well, if I were to fertilize that in the right amount of time, I'm promoting that fescue and not the Bermuda grass. So therefore, I can simply run a hot wire on it and use that as part of my winter supplementation. One producer we worked with in Nowata County had a tree line, and underneath that tree was a bunch of fescue. We told him to fertilize it. He did, and that got him through at least a month of extra grazing without supplementation. So be thinking of, is there a piece of land over here that does have fescue I can promote? Or can I go in and put in some sort of cool season to get me through those months? Maybe even a small grain pasture, fence off a couple of acres. And if you can, plant wheat or rye or something like that and graze that as a supplement. Even that has turned out to be cheaper than a supplement a lot of times. So energy would look very similar to this as well. But I just wanted to put the protein up there just so that we could all just kind of get a visual of it. Your energy would look very similar to that same graph. All right, so if we can't do it with standing forage, we need to look at supplementing or supplying our nutrients through our hay. So Justin, so far, is there any questions about the nutrition side of it?
I don't see any yet, Earl.
They must be all asleep. Okay. So the biggest portion of my job is looking at, what kind of forage availability we have in the fall and pairing that with supplementations. Okay. Most of us are going to be looking at, because we've gotten used to, hey, we have to have hay, we have to have hay, we have to have hay. And I admit, You're not going to go a year without feeding hay. That's just the way it is. But even my own dad, I've told him before, I said, hey, you need to get some fertilizer out there on it, on that pasture. And he says, well, I can't afford to fertilize it because I got to buy hay. It's hard to get him to think, man, if you would spend money on fertilizer, you wouldn't have to buy near as much hay. But it's just a mindset that's been set in him for so long. So again, when we look at that direct correlation between the number of days that you hay and and your feed costs, man, there's a direct correlation to it. Okay. So let me ask y'all real quick. Hopefully we can get some participation on this, Justin. How many days per year would you say you feed hay? I don't know if I can see the chat, Justin.
Nobody's saying anything.
Well, they haven't yet, have they?
No.
I'll start calling you out.
Are you gonna unmute yourself and just say it?
Too damn many.
There you go. There's one.
There's one honest person in this whole group.
Yeah, the most honest answer out there. 45 days.
45 days, David. That is really, really tight. That is very good. All right. So I'm going to show you some Kansas data. This is from KFMA data here. And what you see there are, as we look across, where they have it broken up for Kansas, most people are feeding between 90 to 120 days. All right. You see some people out there, there's even 10% of those people that were feeding over 150 days of hay. That is a lot. You also see here, there's very few that are feeding less than 60. So, Kenneth says 135. Kenneth, I think you're about average for Eastern Oklahoma, really. And I think most of our producers do not pay enough attention to how many days they're doing that. Now I like going out and seeing cows and seeing them around round bale feeders, but eventually when it is 20 degrees outside, the February freeze got you. I see. Yeah, everybody's feeding hay during that time. So there is if you want to talk about a pandemic, there's this pandemic of feeding over 120 days of hay a year. And all that boils down to stocking rates and being honest with what you can carry, being prepared for times like right now in a drought situation and things like that. So when I always give a presentation to talk about hay, I always have to bring this thing up because I'm always talking about nutrition and how that relates to cattle. So I've got a question. If I can get this back going again. Which hay is better? Okay. There's two different types of hay right there. Square bale. If y'all were to guess, which one is better, the one on the left or the one on the right?
I think the one on the right looks good to me.
All right. I would totally agree. Right. I can just tell you, oh, look at that. I love that. Right. Depends on a test. That's exactly right. So this is square hay that has came off of my place. I live at Oolagaw, just north of Tulsa. Same pasture, same everything, probably different timing by 30 days or so, just different years. So here's what the test actually said. The one here on the left that looked like a broom tested 9.2% crude protein and high energy at 58.3% TDN. On the right, this beautiful green stuff, 7.7% crude protein, and still a really good sample to me. But if we're starting to nitpick on the supplementation, that's when it really starts to separate itself. If I were selling anything, this one on the right will definitely sell a lot better than the one on the left. So here is my little lesson to learn here. This is a picture of my oldest boy, who is now almost 15 years old. Do you see a little boy with a spiked mullet? or do you see a little boy with his grandmother sitting behind him? So that is, I would not let my kid have long hair like that. That is actually my mother-in-law's hair in the background. She's sitting right behind him, right under his arm. You can see her arm, right? So my point here is, with hay, looks can be very deceiving. And so if we don't have those forage analysis tests, we can't really tell by our eyes which one is better. Now we can make an educated decision, just like we made here, of which one is better, looking at, leaf to stem ratio and the smell in it. My kids make fun of me because I smell feed all the time. But again, we're just trying to make an educated guess. So if we look at this graph, this is not research, okay? This is literally information that come off of my place there in Oologah. I've kept track of it ever since we moved in, of how much I've produced and the quality of that. So the first thing I want to look at are the green bars at the bottom. And this is production, yield per acre, tons per acre. So you'll see the first 2 years we were there, 14 and 15, we had really good production. That brown hay that you saw on the left was actually from 2014. And then in 16, 17, and 18, we're looking at about 1.5 tons production. 19 and 20, we were back up above 3, and then back down to about 1.5 tons this year. Okay. Why are those 4 as high as they are? Well, that's the years that we actually put money into it. That's the years that we fertilized in the spring and got that additional growth. If you listen to Brian Pugh, our agronomist, he says that most Bermuda grass will make about 1 ton per acre every year unfertilized. But by figuring up how much hay I'm pulling off of it, I'm estimating mine without any fertility will basically make 1.5 tons every year. So that's our yield. The next thing I want to point out is the blue dots, which is our energy values, our TDN. You'll see the lowest was this year, 2021, at almost 55%. And then the highest is up there a little bit above 59 in 2020. So it looks like there's a great variant there, and there is, but it's still not enough between 54.5 to 59 that is considerably different. Yeah, 59 is way higher than the rest of them, but it's still pretty good energy levels. At least we're not dealing with a 50, which would be a very mature rank forage and low quality. So the big things I really want to point out is our protein levels, which are the orange dots. You can see that they've ranged from just a little above 6 to my highest was a little, I think 11.4 in 2020. What was that due to? It could be due to the fertility, timing, and things like that. But that is a huge range in quality off the same field. And so if we're not getting a forage test every year, then we don't know exactly how to supplement to that. Okay. So this is my get a forage test every year for every pasture or every, lot of hay that you have. And let's start building a nutritional system to match those forages, or match those forages to the animals we have that are needing requirements. So a little side note here, that 2014 hay, I put all that square hay in a barn. I retested that hay in 2018, so 4 years later, and it still tested 9.4 and 56% TDN. So there, the big thing is storage is key. All right, if you're not going to use all your hay this year, try to get it in a barn. And if you have hay that's stored in a barn, it's probably going to hold its nutrient requirements as long as that barn is, weatherproof, or it's going to hold its nutrients. So if you are going to build a building, I mean, I want a huge humongous shop on my place for me to go play in. But right now, storing my hay is is more important than the shop. So that's what the barn's full of. So if we do this, how does that make a difference on our animals? So what I've done is I've taken each one of these samples and I said, hey, how much supplement would it take to match, this forage for a 1,200 pound lactating cow? So what we have here are the blue bars is a 14%, retail product. The orange bars would be a 20% cube, and the gray bars would be 37% cube. So you see, there's some years where it doesn't take much supplementation at all. And then you have years like 2017 where it takes quite a bit of supplementation. That's the year that crude protein was down to, I think, 6.4. Without that forage analysis, we wouldn't know these differences. I hopefully y'all agree that in Eastern Oklahoma, the #1 supplement used in all of Eastern Oklahoma is a 20% cube. And it is a very well-rounded product, but it gives us the energy of a 14 with just a little bit more protein. So if we're really short of protein, we're going to have to feed a bunch of 14s, but that's when the 37s normally are more attractive. If we're really short of energy, well, that's when we need to feed the 14s. And so the supplement is going to change over time. Now you see in the year 2020, there are no bars. Well, what's the reason for that? Let's see it in the chat. I've really put them to sleep now, Justin.
Yeah, what you guys thinking? There's a reason he didn't feed any feed. Probably spent all of his money on fertilizer. He didn't have any.
You sold all your cows.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably right. Market was low in 2020, right? Sell low, buy high. Forgot to test. No, I tested it. If you'll remember back to this last slide, let's see if I can
way
back
high
this
up on the chart.
Look at the quality of this in
Nothing they can
2020.
do to quality of hay. There you go. Now we're getting there.
Right.
Good job, Clark.
Good job, Clark. So the quality of hay was so high, it's over 11% crude protein and then over 59% TDN. So the animal could consume enough forage that we don't need any supplementation. Well, if you knew that, if your forage tested like this one did, how much money could you save off of supplementation? Right? So quite a bit. All right. So that's pounds of supplement required.
Yeah, and also, Earl, it kind of makes a difference if you got a couple of different hays. You save the best ones for the time you need it the most and feed some of the other stuff.
That's right.
When the requirements aren't as high, maybe.
Yep. And I'll talk about that in just a few minutes here, Justin. But that's absolutely right. What I hope you come away with tonight is you need to start building that nutritional strategy in, hey, I'm going to target this hay on those animals that need the higher, energy requirement. And then I'm going to take this other hay and feed it to the lower energy requirements. Okay. All right. So I looked at current prices and I looked at just this year's hay. And so if we look at feeding a 20% cube to match that hay, it's going to cost us about 54 cents per head per day. But because we're short of protein more than we are energy, it makes more sense to feed a 37. Okay. There we would be feeding about 1 3/4 pounds of a 37 per head per day. And that's going to cost us, even though our tonnage price for the 37s is way more expensive, we're feeding less of it. So therefore it only costs us 36 cents per head per day. So if I had 50 head and I feed them for 100 days, that's $900 worth of savings just by changing which supplement best match the forage. Okay. I will tell you that most of the producers I worked with when I worked in the feed mill and even now, a lot of their regimen is when they're, coming through gestating and during the winter, it's normally about 2 pounds of 20s. And then once they start lactating, it's 4 pounds of 20s. So if that's true, and again, we're looking at a lactating 1,200 pound lactating cow here, they would still be feeding 4 pounds of 20s a day, which is even more than what the cow would actually require with that hay. So again, man, getting that forage analysis, but not only getting it, taking it to Justin and your county educator, wherever you're at, and saying, help me work through this to figure out what I need and when I need it. So in this scenarios and all of these forages, at current prices, a 37 was the most economical on all of them. Okay. But there's things you have to realize when you're making that decision. One, definitely look at current prices, right? If you don't know, I know right now, every feed mill should have out their October through March booking prices. So get your prices on what you normally feed and say, hey, give me the prices on 14s, 20s, 37s, or whatever you're wanting to feed, and do some shopping. Okay. The other thing that's going to affect that could be your management practices. For instance, I worked with the guy who bales my hay actually, and we went through his forage analysis one year, and I told him, I said, all right, bud, if you were to switch from a 20 to a 14 because he was short on energy, man, I could save you so much more money, right, for his cows. So, man, he was all pumped up about it. But then he said, well, I still have to feed my bulls and my replacement heifers, and I only have one overhead bin. Well, at that point, we're going back to a 20. And so the only information I could really give him was how much to feed per head per day of those 20s. The 20 wasn't the most economical, but then it also fit his management practices. Another thing to look at is, if you'll look over here on the left, that 2014, if 37s were the cheapest option, I'm only feeding maybe 3/4 of a pound per head per day. Well, if I'm feeding cows in a line, it's going to be really hard to put out a 3/4 of a pound per head per day. You can't string it out long enough. You're going to have boss cows that eat 1.5 pounds and some cows not eat anything at all. Whether you have bunks or not, or things like that, that could change the way you're dealing with. Class of animal, I kind of talked about that with the producer I worked with. Also looking at alternative feeds, what can you get your hands on? There's several producers I worked with before that, were really close to a local brewery, and they could get their spent grains for pretty much free as long as they went and picked them up. And so we can use that in these calculations to best fit, hopefully, the scenario that fits our forages. So look for those alternative feeds that are out there. If you have questions on them, contact Justin and just say, hey, can I use this? Does it make sense to use this over what I've been doing? So when you get your forage sample in and you send it in, when you get it back, it'll look just like this, I think. I don't think they've changed it since this. If you'll look all the way to the right, you'll see it says as fed, that column. Don't even pay attention to it. I'm not too sure why they put that in there. You'll see that asterisk there, and it basically says it takes the dry basis and it adds 11% to it. I never look at that column. Okay. Really, the only things I look at when we're looking at this for a cow is, first thing I look at is the percent dry matter. Okay. That tells me what kind of product I'm looking at. Most hays are going to be between, 88 to 92, 87 or something like that. That tells me we're dealing with a dry hay. You know, if it was 50% dry matter, that probably tells them we were dealing with silage. You know, if it's 30% dry matter, we're dealing with fresh forage, things like that. From there, the other two things I'm really looking at is our crude protein on a dry matter basis and our TDN on a dry matter basis. Okay. So when you call in and you're looking at this and you're saying, all right, Earl, can you help me work through this? I'm going to say, okay, what was your dry matter percentage in this scenario? 90.1. What was your crude protein? And when I say that, I want it on a dry matter basis. So 7.7 versus 7. And the reason for that is no matter what happens, that dry matter basis is not going to change. Okay. Your cows are going to pull the moisture out of it anyway. What she cares about is how much is in there on a dry matter. For instance, if you were on the way to Justin's office with your forage sample and you spilt your Sonic drink on it and it increased the moisture content, that will dilute the as received amounts. So instead of 7% crude protein out there, it might be 6.5. But again, once we dry it down and look at it on a dry matter basis, it would still always be 7.7. All right. So again, we're always looking at that dry matter basis. So those are the three things I'm really looking at. As far as quality wise, you know, you've seen where my hays were normally hitting. To me, if you have Bermuda grass, that's about 8% crude protein and mid 50s. That's pretty average, you know, Bermuda grass or prairie grass sample. You get up to, you know, 9-10% crude protein and upper 50s, close to 60% TDN. Those are high quality to me. We start getting in the low quality when we get to about 5% crude protein and lower 50s on TDN. All right. So let me ask you one more question for those who are still with us. Would you buy this forage? We're sitting here at 85% dry matter, 10.8% crude protein, and 56.2% TDN. Would you buy that forage? David said no, depends on the price. David, why are you saying no? Or Renee? It will take care of a cow till calving. Yep. Even this will, as far as protein wise, my hay is higher quality. Protein wise, this will meet a lactating cow's requirements. You just might need just a little bit more energy on it. But I will tell you that this hay was sent to me out of Ottawa County up there at Miami. And the producer that sent it in was extremely frustrated because he bought it sight unseen. He sent in a test. We send back our normal thing. Hey, it ought to meet a, you know, a dry cow's requirement. You might need to supplement energy for lactating, but his cows would not eat it at all. And just, he put out a bill and they won't touch it. The educator finally goes out there and she said it was nothing but broom sedge and greenbriers. So greenbriers are extremely high in protein. So it makes it look really good. But again, the palatability of it was not there. So the producer was pretty much stuck with this hay and couldn't get cows to eat it. So the kind of the rule there is we cannot rely on just looks or analysis alone. You know, I'm saying get a forage analysis and try to base your opinions on that. But if you don't actually see it, our analysis is only, you know, again, crude protein is just testing for nitrogen. You know, and there's a lot of protein in some low quality, meaning low palatability feeds. So we definitely want to,
Earl, that greenbrier ought to slow consumption down a little bit.
Yeah, they won't eat it. And that was his problem, was they would not eat it. And, you know, normally when we're looking at quality, Justin, we're looking at that TDN and saying, well, yeah, they ought to be able to eat that. But again, it's the palatability. if you have a hay like this and you're asking me what to do with it to get cows to eat it, that's when you're probably going to look at like a hay grinder and grinding it up in smaller pieces, maybe putting some molasses on it or something like that, just to increase palatability to get consumption up for it. So let me tell you some local data here. Justin may not know it, but I actually called a secretary and stole his login for our Soils lab and looked up all of the samples from McLean County in 2020. So each one of those dots represents a forage sample that came into McLean County in 2020. You have your crude protein down along the bottom, and then your TDN up the left-hand side. All right. So we see that we have some samples out here at, over 25% crude protein that are 64% TDN. We have some samples here that are 5% crude protein and 60% TDN. I love showing these types of graphs because it shows there are some correlation between protein and energy, but it's not exact science. We can have a sample, for instance, native grass tends to be low in protein, but high in energy. Okay. And so, or higher in energy. So just because we test for protein doesn't always tell us the energy. And luckily, since I've been here since 2013, we have gotten the lab to change the way that we do our forage sampling to better serve our clients, our producers, because I need to know more than just protein to help you figure out which supplement to use. And so when I look at this, I always love to draw boxes around them. So I always do this right here, okay? If we're looking at a 1,200 pound lactating cow that's eating 30 pounds of dry matter a day, that's 2.5% of her body weight. If we look at from 10% on the bottom, look at 10%, anything to the right of that, we have met her crude protein requirements. Anything less than that needs protein supplementation. Okay. If we look at like where this blue box starts at the bottom, that's at 58% TDN. That's how her energy requirement would be. So anything above that, we've met her energy requirements. Anything below that, she needs supplemental energy. So the way that's kind of broken down is your green box up in the top right-hand corner, we have met her protein and we have met her energy requirements. So therefore, we should not need any supplementation given good weather, right? So we shouldn't have to put out any sort of supplementation. Now, there are some of them, to me, once you get over about 17 or 18% crude protein, those should not be full fed. Those are pretty much supplements at that point. I don't know how they got energy levels up to 80 something percent. That must be like a TMR or something. Do you know, Justin?
It was a liquid feed.
Ah, that's what it is. Okay. So again, those are supplementations that's over there. If we look at like that yellow box in the bottom, we have met her energy, her protein requirement. We just need to supplement energy. So that tells me I'm probably going to pick a lower protein supplement because I just need the energy. The blue box, that means that we have met her energy requirements. We just need to supplement protein. So that's where that 37 or something like that's going to come in. Maybe even straight soybean meal. Down there in the bottom left-hand corner, that white box, they need a little bit of both. But you also got to understand that every feed ingredient we do feed has both. Okay. So that's kind of the way it works up. I took each one of those samples, just like I did with my hay analysis, and said, okay, well, how many pounds of supplement would be required? So let's look at that. Again, we look across there, we see several of them that do not need any supplementation at all. We see some of them, like the third one over, it doesn't need, it needs what? 1/10 of a pound of protein, and that's probably about it. The way to kind of look at this as you go across, anytime that blue bar, which is a 14%, is extremely high, that tells me that sample is short of protein. And anytime they're really close together, that tells me that we probably need the energy. Okay. So as I said before, a 20% supplement cube is probably the most common supplement used in Eastern Oklahoma. Very rarely is it the most economical. All right. So what I did from there, again, took how many pounds this is of each supplement and tried to figure out for that forage, which supplement best fit that scenario. So if that bar stops at 14, that means a 14% was the most economical. If it goes all the way up to 37, that means the 37. In all of these samples, due to those prices you see up there in the right-hand corner, none of them at any point was a 20 the most economical. Now, again, there's things that go into that: management practices, classes of animals. We're only talking about one class of animal here in one stage of production. Okay. So picking the right one could save us a lot of money during that stage of production. And again, I ran those numbers again using those same prices. And if we were to switch, if we were feeding 20s in the past, if we were to switch from a 20 to whichever one was most economical, how much would we save for our 50 cows over 100 days? Well, for some of us, you're not saving hardly any money at all. But for others, there's that one that's you could save over $2,000 in 100 days by switching to the cheapest supplementation. All right. Even though our 37s cost us $410 a ton, that's a lot of money. Because we're feeding less of it and we're supplying exactly what the animal needs for that forage, we can save a lot of money. So hopefully you're starting to think about this and sit there and go, okay, well, I need to do some shopping. I need to have my forage analysis done, and I need to sit down with Justin and work through what best fits my scenario. As that animal's nutrient requirements change, the product you use and everything's going to change. Okay. And hopefully I'll show that in just a minute on how that can change throughout the winter. How does this year look? So these are the samples that they've taken in so far this year. Looks like pretty normal years. A lot of protein in there this year. So I'm assuming some alfalfa has come in, Justin, and things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you tell me what is this a liquid feed? The 4% crude protein, but 80%?
That one was dehydrated potato cake.
All right. Hey, it's a perfect example of something we could use and probably get it really cheap if we were short of energy, right? So, all right. So that kind of gets us thinking about that. So if we take those same prices that we just talked about for the 14s, 20s, and 37s, now I'm not pushing for those products, okay? Those are just common retail products. If you're using, four-way commodity mixes, or you're using something, the same thing would happen here. We would evaluate these prices the same way, okay?
Hey, Earl?
Yes.
Can I tell you my take-home message from what you just showed us?
Oh, yeah, if you were paying attention, that'd be great.
My take-home message is, I think I need to really start promoting forage samples a little harder, if that was all the dots there were.
Well, I think that was only from August.
Oh, okay.
That's literally this season, I think, because I looked at the dates on that, Justin, and
yeah,
but those were all pretty
we
recent.
probably don't. I think that's probably one of our biggest things. We probably don't run nearly enough forage samples for the amount of hay that's produced in this county fed. So
that is that's every county I look at, Justin. Because I've been to county meetings where they've had this many dots, and there's 80 people sitting in the audience, and I promise you all of them feed hay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, only these 20 something have information. The rest of you are just guessing. Right.
I think we got some work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, like I said, I will retire still preaching, get a soil sample, get a forage sample, and implant your calves. All right. So now we get into supplementing. How would that change the amount of supplement as cow size changes? So we're making assumptions here. This is just for fun and learning that our hay is 9% crude protein and 56% TDN. All right. If our cow weighed 1,000 pounds, she's going to eat 2.5% of her body weight. That's 25 pounds. To supplement her, it would take 4.4 pounds of 14s, 3.2 pounds of 20s, and almost 3 pounds of 37s. So for that animal, the cheapest supplement at that time is the 20s at 54 cents per head per day. All right. If we step up to the 1,200 pound cow, she's eating 2.5% of her body weight, which is 30 pounds. Now the 14s are 2.4, 1.6, and 1.2 for the 37s. In that scenario, the 37 is the cheapest option at 24 cents per day. So how do we think things are going to measure up for this 1,400 pound cow? Anybody going to make predictions on this? We pretty much answered it earlier. That 1,400 pound cow is going to eat 35 pounds of dry matter a day. That's 2.5% of her body weight. And because she is eating that many pounds of nutrients, she has met her energy and her protein requirements. So knowing our cow size, or maybe even separating our herd into cow size, if we wanted to do that, could save us some money. I would say most people would say they have 1,100 pound cows when they really have 1,300 pound cows or 1,400 pound cows, right? So scales are getting cheaper, it seems like, and you can buy some cheap ones on eBay or whatever and make your own platforms. They're well worth the investment, not just for collection of calf weaning weights and things like that, but cow size as well. And start recording that and start looking at it. So,
but now, Earl, that doesn't mean she's the most efficient, right?
That doesn't mean she's the most efficient. No. And I've looked at that before, Justin, is one way to look at it is that calf's 205 day weaning weight divided by the cow's mature weight. Well, hopefully that's, 45 to 50% of her mature weight. And so you could sit here and go, well, which cow is the best, right? My 1,000 pound cow or my 1,400? In my mind, it doesn't matter as long as she's doing her job. If this 1,000 pound cow can wean a 500 pound calf, that's pretty easy for her. That's 50%. But that 1,400 pound cow better be weaning about 700 pound calf because it costs so much more forage wise to get her there. So I don't know. That's my opinion. Everybody has different opinions on cow efficiency. So to kind of illustrate why this has happened, because this goes against the way we think of bigger cows need more supplementation of what people think. And every time I present this, everybody says that, yeah, 1,400 pound cow, she needs more supplement. They're not calculating how much she's eating on the forage side of it. Okay. But we also have to realize at the same time as that, if she's eating more, our nutrient requirements are different. So the gray line here is basically saying if we took that requirement for that 900 pound cow and divided it by 900 pounds, and then use the same increment up to 1,500 pound cow, then that would say, well, equivalently, the 900 pound cow requires 2.7 pounds of protein a day, and the 1,500 pound cow would require 4.5 pounds of protein a day. But our requirements are not proportionate to body weight. there's a major equation and that goes through on how we calculate that. Because in reality, the 900 pound cow requires 2.7 pounds a day, and the 1,500 pound cow requires just 3.2 pounds per day. So as we get bigger in size, the protein level does go up, but not at the same rate as that of the 900 pound cow. So there's two things going on: higher dry matter intake and lower nutrient requirements for the bigger cows. So some things I want to point out, the free nutrition calculators that you can get at beef.okstate.edu. If you'll go to that web page, down there in the bottom, you'll see a little tab that says calculators. If you'll click on that, there's a whole list of like Excel spreadsheets and things like that that are free to anybody that wants them. And there's 3 of them that I'm going to talk about here, and one of them I'm going to show you how to use. So the one that I developed and I kind of push because it's simple and easy is the one we call the Forage supplementation program. It's on that website. We'll talk about it in just a minute. I'll show you how to use it. There is one that is a lot more complicated, but a lot more detailed, is the calculator program, which they have redone in the last 2 years. And it's a really great program if you know that your genetics are different. You know, the Forage supplementation program is working off of a generic cow, whereas in the calculator you can say she's 50% Angus, a quarter Holstein, and a quarter Red Angus, whatever. And you can say that. You can also say in there that, you know, she's in a body condition score 5, and in 120 days I want her in a 6. And it will help you calculate that back and forth, but it's a lot more complicated calculator, you know, than the Forage supplementation program I'm going to show you. The other one that I really love, and it's a really old one, is the OSU ration formulator. I've used this one since college. That's been a while, but it is really good at balancing rations and telling us, again, if I throw in so many pounds of alfalfa, grass hay, whatever, it'll give me my composition over there on the right-hand side. The calculator will do that too. I'm just not used to that right now because I've been using this ration formulator forever. But it was formulated mainly for growing animals. The new calculator program also does cows and growing animals. So it's kind of all in one thing. All right. So to kind of show you the program, I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to start sharing the program. Can you see it, Justin? Did you step out?
No, I'm here. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. So you can see the beef program. If you download it, it might look, you know, like this. And I developed this for our county educators to use to help you gather information and get information back when you do a forage analysis. And it's really simple. We're going to go in here. It's going to ask you the description of your forage. Let's just make one up real quick. It's 90% dry matter, 7% crude protein, and 54% TDN. Okay. You can put a cost in there per ton if you know it. Most people don't, and we don't put one in there. The next is your description of your cow. And all of this that has an asterisk beside it is a drop-down menu. So you'll see 900 up to 1,500 pounds. We had it at 1,000. She's in her middle trimester. Your options are middle trimester, last trimester, or lactating. And then over here, you got your peak milk. If they are gestating, so middle or last trimester, your only option will be dry. Okay, so make sure that that's selected, because if I go and change this to lactating, it doesn't automatically change that peak milk. But now if you'll click on it, you have 3 options, 10, 15, or 20. All right, because those are the requirements that come out of our OSU beef manual. You can select one and saying, This 1,000-pound lactating cow milking 20 pounds of peak milk, what it's looking at is her stage of production, but then also this TDN value right here, in determining how much will she eat. So if it's a really low quality forage, she will not eat 2.5% of her body weight. So let's change that to 51. So if we change that to 51, you see dry matter intake went down to 2.2. That's because it's a more mature rank forage and it's just not palatable. Okay. If we increase that to 60, all of a sudden it goes to 2.7. So again, it's looking at her stage of production and that quality of forage there. I think we had that at 54. It's going to pull up this animal's nutrient requirements right here. She needs 2.8 pounds of protein a day and 16 pounds of TDN. And then this box, these boxes right here will either be green or red. And that tells you if they're green, you've met her protein requirements. If they're red, you haven't met her energy or protein or energy requirements. Okay. That says we're 1.1 pounds short of protein and 2.5 pounds short of energy. So that's saying if she's eating all she wants of that forage, we still need to supplement something. Okay. So now we have drop down menus here for supplementations, but I want to show you where those are from. Down here, this list of supplements. You have a cow tab, other animals, but then this list of supplements. You'll see all of these different types of ingredients in alphabetical order, right? All the way through. And then at the bottom, I have some retail products. And then if you have a custom mix, you can put it in here and then it'll show up on that supplementation list. Okay. So all it's asking for is dry matter, protein, TDN. This is simple and easy. So let's say we want to go back to our 14s, our 20s, and our 37s. Okay. Prices are $266, $325, $410. So if we put those in, it automatically calculates how many pounds are required for that forage. And then it'll highlight in orange the cheapest option. So for this forage, for that animal, the cheapest option is 3.72 pounds of a 37, and it's going to cost us 76 cents per day. Okay. So what that allows you to do is quickly put your forage in, put in your prices that you shop for, and it'll basically try to tell you, hey, this based off of numbers, this is the best decision, economic wise. And you can determine on your own whether it's worth changing or not. So if I go back, stop share, share again to PowerPoint. Sure. If I go to this slide, this is a nutrition exercise that I've come up with, and hopefully y'all are still engaged here. Your good for nothing brother-in-law has asked you to help figure out what he needs to do with his cows through the winter. He knows you've been attending these OSU meetings, and even as dumb as he is, he sees he needs major improvements. You told him the first step is get a representative hay sample, send it to the lab, and call around for prices. He's done that. Surprising to you, he does have a controlled calving season. He's expecting about his 50 head of 1,200-pound cows to be calving February 1st. After doing a forage budget, you've determined that he's had enough standing forage to get him until December 15th with just some supplementation. Normally, he starts feeding 2 pounds of 20s in the middle of November till they calve, and then he feeds them 4 pounds a day. He's figured up he needs a total of 25,500 pounds of cubes, and that's going to cost him a little over $4,100 for the season. So you need to determine a strategy for feeding his hay and just determine which supplement best fits the forage and the animal that he can buy in bulk and store in an overhead bin. All right. So we have 2 different hays there, one from the west pasture, one from the east pasture. And then you see our supplementation prices there. All right. So that's kind of our scenario. The things we're going to look for is November 15th to the December 15th, which is 30 days. We have that standing forages out there. With help, you calculated you need a 31 or 37% protein, feeding about 3 pounds a day. It costs us about 50 cents at $750 total for that 30 days. If we are sitting here between December 15th and February 1st, which hay here, the west pasture or the east pasture, would best fit those late gestating cows? Interaction time. West. That's right. Because we're in that lower nutrient requirements. So therefore, let's feed the lower quality feed to them, because we know that once they do calve February 1st, we're going to need a lot more nutrients to supply and try to make up that difference between the two. Okay, so let's switch back over. Okay, so what we would do is we'd come in here, we'd put in the nutrient analysis of that west pasture. We know that it is a 1,200 pound lactating, or this would be a gestating, right? Last trimester, dry cow. Okay. It's going to calculate all this up. That's wrong. Anyway, it's going to say we need 3.1 pounds. That's right. 3.1 pounds of a 14. And that's going to cost us 4/10 per day. Because if we look at the energy requirement here at 51.2, that means that, we're really going to be short of energy. So again, when we're short of energy, normally our 14s are our cheapest. So for that scenario, we're going to put in a 14% cube, feeding 3.1 pounds per day. It's going to cost us 41 cents per head. So a total of $922.50 for that 45 days. Well, then once they calve in February 1st, we're going to switch to the east pasture hay. Okay. And I'll go ahead and put the analysis in for it. 9.4, 57.8. Okay. You see everything changes here, and then all of a sudden everything's highlighted in orange. Well, that's because we're not feeding anything, because if we were still dealing with that last trimester, that forage would make up for all the nutrient requirements. But once we change that to lactating 20 pounds, now we're back down to a 37 is the most cost effective, feeding a half a pound a day, 10 cents. So that gives us a total of $450 for that feeding period, that 90 days, because we're feeding the better quality forage. Okay. So we add that up, that's $2,122. He wants to know, did you save him any money? Well, of course you did. You saved him $2,021.50, which if you work that up, that's almost half of his what he said he was going to spend anyway. I also have in there at the end of January, he can get dried distillers grains for $275 a ton. Is that economical for him? So, okay, well, let's go in here. We have the same stage of animal here. We go to this list and we can scroll up slowly, but to distillers grains, and you'll see on there it'll have two different ones, distillers grains, and it'll say distillers grains Milo. Knowing which one to get there is important. We want the distillers grains. We can type in $275, and then yes, it is cheaper, okay, by 1 cent per head per day. Now, next question is, would we suggest that change or not? And this is where you start talking about management. I personally would not suggest that change because of one reason only, because he said it's going to go in an overhead bin. And if you ever put dried distillers grains in an overhead bin, you had a hard time getting them out. There are some companies out there now that have a new way of processing dried distillers grains cubes that they say flow really well. And I know a lot of people that are happy with them. But if we had loose distillers grains, I would not suggest putting those in an overhead bin. So,
You can't buy those cubed ones for $275 either.
well, I don't know what the price was, Justin. I was just making stuff up for this scenario.
Be about $350 probably if you had it cubed.
So, and again, I have in this scenario that, you know, your old good for nothing brother-in-law, he's missing the special sauce on his Big Mac, and you know his cows doesn't weigh 1,200 pound cows. They're actually 1,400 pound cows. So what would they need? And if we just change this simply, only thing we're changing is weight. All of a sudden, that 1,400 pound cow does not need any supplementation with that forage. All right. And again, that's a lot harder for somebody to wrap their heads around. But again, you got to think of they're eating a lot more forage. So therefore they're increasing the nutrient intake. All right. My last question on that was, if he was still dead set on feeding 20s, what would the break-even price need to be to match that of a 37? Okay, so we're still talking same forage. We're going to change this back down to a 1,200 pound cow. All right, let's get rid of this. So now we're just going to start changing the price of that 20 to get down to where it is 10 cents per head per day. Currently at 325, let's say it's 250. We're still not there. 225. Oh, 225. Still not there. 200. He has to buy 20s for $200 or less, which is not going to happen, to be equivalent to the same price per head per day as the 37s. Okay, so that's a useful way you can use this program to, you know, evaluate what you need to be feeding, what it might cost you, what are some alternatives, and be able to compare those. So this is a really neat tool that I really enjoy. But again, realize it's a basic tool. It you know, it's a blanket. It covers a lot of stuff. It does not take into account you know, harsh weather. It does not take into account breed or body condition score or anything like that. This is for each cow. I'd need to input the information for each cow in the group, the closest animals together. Apologize, my phone lost connection. Yeah, this would be per head per day is what these recommendations are. So you just take, for instance, right there, it requires a pound of 20s. You multiply that times however many cows you got, and that's how many pounds you put out there. That's the recommendation. Now, you know, work with your county educator. And if you can't get out there every other day, we can look at, you know, stacking it up and feeding every other day, possibly every third day, depending on how many pounds is required for that. So we never want to feed more than 1% of their body weight at a time. And also, to me, that also depends on what supplement we're using. So for instance, you know, if you have these 1,200 pound cows, we never want to dump out more than 12 pounds at a time. So that means that we either go to, you know, if we're feeding 4 pounds a day, let's say that our forage says we need to feed 4 pounds, we can go 2 days and feed them 8 pounds, but I wouldn't go 3 days and feed them 12. Because then once we hit that 1%, that we're really changing the rumen every third day. So there's limitations to that. But yes, this is based off of cost per head per day thing. The other thing I'll show you real quick is this other animals tab. If we click on it, scroll to the top, it'll bring up your forage analysis, and then it'll bring up supplement number 1. So right now it's pulling up that 14% cubed because that's what I had at the top. And then the rest of these are different groups of animals. So growing steers and heifers, again, all drop down menus. 600 pound calf, you want it to gain 2.5 pounds a day. So it's estimated to eat 15 pounds of forage a day, but you would still need to supplement it, you know, almost 5.5 pounds of supplement to reach that 2.5 pounds a day. So one way to look at this is I do have that forage here. I do have a 600-pound calf, but I'm feeding it 3 pounds a day. What average daily gain can I, you know, look at getting? Well, then we can just go in here and play with this. Well, at 3 3/4, we'd get 2. And then at 1.5 pounds average daily gain, we'd get 2.1. So you're guessing between 1.5 to 2 pounds a day would be your estimated average daily gain, right? So there's one for yearlings, growing yearlings, mature bulls, and then replacement heifers. And anything in blue on this sheet is a drop-down menu, so it's kind of just plug and play, and it just kind of brings up rough recommendations. So that is what I had for this evening, Justin. Hopefully I went through there, hopefully gave you some tools that you can start looking at. Hopefully, if you don't have your forage analysis in, you're contacting Justin and saying, hey, can I borrow a probe and go get these samples in? Because again, these booking prices are out right now, and they'll start October 1st. So, you know, if you use enough feed to have it booked, it's worth getting those prices and you know, doing your homework on it and trying to save as much as you can of that 40 to 50% of annual cost, so that maybe next year our CPA says, man, what'd you do to make so much money in the cow business? How do we find the last page you showed? The ones for the other animals? Is that what he's asking? Yes. So right beside here, I'll share that again. Right beside this cow page here at the bottom, there's another tab that says other animals. And so you'll just click on it and it'll be right there. It's all within the same Excel spreadsheet. And again, if you wanted to, if you had your own mix, we can go in here, Justin's mix, and we're going to say it's 90, 14, 70. We just made up a Justin's mix, right? Then we can go over here. If we select this, we scroll down below that, we see Justin's mix. And so it'll automatically pull that up. And so again, if you have a custom ration that you know like to use or whatever, we can put that in there and figure it up real easy. So that's where that was. Hope that helped you.
All right, Earl, thank you. Appreciate the information, Earl. Very well presented, very well, definitely had, well, that's the reason Earl got the call to do this evening. He definitely has a way to approach this subject that kind of makes it a little easier for us common people to figure out. So we appreciate that, Earl.
Again, I just want to just say, like, really be looking at your standing forage you have now, and I know as high as fertilizer prices are, feed prices are. You've seen what those prices are. I mean, it's, if we could get some rain and get some, you know, some fertilizer down and really promote it, hopefully it's not too late for Bermuda grass or something like that. That money spent there, and I promise you 8 to 9 times out of 10 is more useful than the money that you're going to spend at the feed store. I know the guys that own the feed stores or the feed mills, and they're doing pretty good, right? So let's take care of what we have at home, maximize what it can do, and then we're still going to go to town to buy feed. That's just the way it is. Again, even if we are grazing that standing forage, we're probably going to need a supplement to help that forage along, to increase digestibility of it and increase the dry matter intake and things like that. So there's a lot more information we could have covered tonight, but I wanted to just cover how we best match that supplement to the forage that we have available.
Well put. Thank you. And like I say, we will not meet in October formally, but if you would like to go to the Pushmataha burn unit for their annual field day on October the 8th, just get with me and let me know, and we'll try to get the information to you. So nothing further. Earl, thanks. As always, like seeing old John Wayne in the background, and you keep doing good work, and we'll see you a little later. Thanks.